Two poor twin sisters beg a young billionaire to save their mother's life. However, when he arrives at the hospital, he is shocked to discover who is lying in that bed. The hospital room was engulfed in a silence, broken only by the steady beep of the monitors and the soft hiss of the oxygen tank. The cool morning light filtered through the half-open blinds, creating a pattern of shadows on Sarah's pale face. At only 23 years old, Sarah looked much older lying in that hospital bed, her frail body nearly swallowed up by the white sheets. Her long brown hair, once full of life, now lay dull and scattered across the pillow. Her eyes, normally bright, were sunken and ringed with dark circles, silent witnesses to her struggle. Beside the bed, sitting in chairs far too big for them, were Emma and Emily, Sarah's 4-year-old twin daughters. Identical in appearance, with golden curls and blue eyes, the girls were opposites in personality. Emma, the older by mere minutes, was serious and observant. Emily, restless and talkative, couldn't stop fiddling with the hem of her little dress. Summoning her strength, Sarah struggled to sit up, a movement that provoked a harsh cough. The rough sound startled the twins. "Mommy?" Emily's voice quivered as she reached out to touch her mother's arm. Sarah forced a smile, trying to hide her pain. "It's all right, my love," she whispered. "Come here, my little ones. Mommy needs to talk to you about something very important." The twins leaned in closer, their expressions a mix of curiosity and worry. Sarah took one daughter's hand in each of her own, feeling the contrast between her cool skin and their small, warm palms. Emily," Sarah began, her voice gaining urgency. "You know Mommy is really sick, right?" The girls nodded silently, their lips trembling. "There's a man," Sarah continued, her voice faltering, "a very important man who can help Mommy. His name is James Anderson." "James Anderson," Emma repeated seriously, as though committing a crucial fact to memory. "That's right, sweetie," Sarah said with a faint smile. "He works in a very tall, beautiful building made of glass. It looks like a giant mirror touching the sky." The twins' eyes grew wide, their imaginations painting a picture of a crystal castle in the clouds. Sarah reached under the pillow and took out a folded piece of paper, her hands trembling. "Here is the address where you can find him," she said, handing the paper to Emma. "But Mommy," Emily interrupted, confused. "Why do we have to go? Why can't Mr. Anderson come here?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears. When she opened them, there was resolve in her gaze. "Because, my darling," she explained gently, "important people sometimes get so busy that we have to go to them. And right now, you two are the only ones who can do this for me." The twins glanced at each other before turning their attention back to their mother. "We'll go, Mummy," Emma said with a gravity beyond her years. "Yes, we'll find Mr. Anderson and bring him here to help you," Emily added, nodding eagerly. Sarah smiled, a real smile this time, lighting up her pale face. "My brave little girls," she murmured, pulling them into a tight hug. At that moment, a nurse entered the room. Claire was young, with a kind face and red hair pulled into a messy bun. Her green eyes softened at the scene. "Good morning, Sarah," she greeted gently. "How are we doing today?" Sarah reluctantly released her daughters and sank back against the pillows, exhausted. "I've been better, Claire," she replied with a weak smile. Claire checked the monitors and adjusted the IV drip, noticing the paper in Emma's hand and the determined expressions on the twins' faces. "What do we have here?" she asked, curious. Emily spoke up excitedly. "We have an important mission. We need to find Mr. James Anderson in a giant glass building so he can help our Mommy." Claire looked at Sarah, who gave a slight nod. "Well," Claire said slowly, "it sounds like you have a very important task. How about I help you with this mission?" The twins' eyes lit up. "Would you really do that?" Emma asked in amazement. Claire smiled. "Of course, all great missions need a team, don't they?" Sarah felt a wave of gratitude. "Claire, I can't ask you to do this." "You're not asking, Sarah, I'm offering," Claire said firmly. "My shift ends in half an hour. I can take the girls to that address and make sure they get there safely." Tears finally spilled from Sarah's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, overcome with emotion. Claire gently squeezed Sarah's shoulder before turning to the twins. "Well, my little adventurers, how about you get ready for our mission? You can wait for me in the playroom while I check on your mum." The twins jumped off their chairs, a mix of excitement and nerves on their faces. They approached the bed for one last hug. Sarah hugged her daughters with all the strength she had left. "Remember, my loves," she murmured, "no matter what happens, you are strong, brave, and very loved." The twins kissed their mother's cheeks before following Claire, their excited voices echoing down the corridor. Alone in the room, Sarah let her tears flow. She gazed out the window, watching the rising sun paint the sky. A new day was beginning, bringing with it the promise of change and the hope of salvation. Sarah closed her eyes, exhausted but resolute. Her daughters were now her messengers, carrying not just an address, but the fate of their entire family. She prayed silently, begging for more time, for a chance to watch her girls grow, for an opportunity to right past mistakes. The sound of the monitors filled the silence, reminding her that every heartbeat, every breath was precious. And somewhere in the city, in a towering glass skyscraper, James Anderson carried on with his life, unaware that two little messengers were on their way, ready to turn his world upside down. The morning sun reflected off the mirrored windows of the impressive Anderson Architectural Group skyscraper, creating a dazzling light show that made Emma and Emily stop, wide-eyed. The building seemed to reach the clouds, exactly as their mother had described, a giant of glass and steel dominating the city skyline. The twins, holding hands, looked at each other, drawing courage from one another. Emma, always the more serious, squeezed Emily's hand and nodded, determined. With hesitant steps, they approached the revolving doors, their reflections distorted in the polished glass. "Remember what Mummy said," Emma whispered. "We can't give up." Emily swallowed hard and nodded, her golden curls bouncing with the motion. Together they pushed through the revolving door and stepped into the building's luxurious lobby. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. The marble floor shone like a mirror, reflecting the crystal chandeliers that hung from the high ceiling. The walls were adorned with modern art and exotic plants in elegant pots. The twins felt tiny and out of place in this opulent setting, their simple dresses and worn shoes in stark contrast to their surroundings. Walking timidly, they made their way to the reception desk, an imposing structure of dark wood and gleaming metal. Behind it, a smartly dressed woman regarded them with a look of surprise and slight annoyance. "May I help you?" asked the receptionist, her tone polite but distant. Emily looked to Emma, waiting for her older sister by minutes to take the lead. Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Please, ma'am," Emma began, her small voice determined. "We need to speak to Mr. James Anderson. It's very important." The receptionist raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Anderson is in a very important meeting. He does not receive visitors without a prior appointment, especially—" She hesitated, looking the girls up and down. "Children." Emily, sensing her sister's hesitation, spoke up. "But it's an emergency," she exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. "We really need his help." The receptionist's expression softened for a moment, but she quickly recovered her professional composure. "I understand you're worried, girls, but I can't interrupt Mr. Anderson. Maybe you could come back another day with an adult." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes, but she fought them back, remembering the promise she made to her mother. "Please," she begged, "it's a matter of life and death. Only Mr. Anderson can help." The receptionist sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Look, I'm really sorry, but I can't let you go upstairs. It's against company policy. Why don't you head home and ask an adult to call to make an appointment?" The twins exchanged desperate looks. Emily began to cry silently, while Emma struggled to keep her composure. "We can't leave," Emma insisted, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "We promised we wouldn't give up. Please, we just need 5 minutes with Mr. Anderson." The receptionist glanced around, clearly uneasy about the scene that was starting to attract attention from others in the lobby. "I'm sorry, girls, but you really have to go now. I can't help you." With heavy hearts, Emma took Emily's hand, and the two sisters left the building. But instead of going away, they sat on the steps outside, determined to wait as long as necessary. The hours passed slowly. The twins watched the constant flow of well-dressed executives and important visitors, all passing them by without a second glance. The receptionist occasionally threw looks through the glass door, a mixture of irritation and concern on her face. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, James Anderson was immersed in a crucial meeting with international investors. Dressed in a flawless suit, he radiated confidence and power as he presented the plans for the company's latest sustainable skyscraper. In the middle of his presentation, his personal assistant Lisa discreetly entered the conference room. She walked over to James and whispered in his ear, "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an unusual situation in the lobby. 2 small girls are insisting on seeing you. They refuse to leave and say it's a matter of life and death." James frowned, momentarily distracted. Something about the description of these girls sparked a strange feeling in him, a mix of curiosity and unease he couldn't explain. "How long have they been there?" he asked quietly. "A few hours, sir. The receptionist tried several times to make them leave, but they refused to go." James looked at the expectant faces around the conference table and made a quick decision. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but I need a brief break. Please help yourselves to coffee and refreshments. I'll return in a few minutes." Ignoring the surprised and confused looks, James left the meeting room and headed to the elevator, with Lisa close behind. "Sir, are you sure you want to interrupt the meeting because of this?" Lisa asked, concerned. James shook his head, unable to explain the impulse driving him. "There's something about this situation, Lisa. I need to see these girls myself." The elevator descended quickly to the ground floor. When the doors opened, James stepped out, his eyes scanning the area until they landed on 2 small figures sitting on the steps outside. Emma and Emily, exhausted and discouraged after hours of waiting, barely noticed the tall, well-dressed man's arrival. Only when he knelt in front of them, his kind blue eyes meeting theirs, did they realize their wait was finally over. "Hello?" said James softly, his voice deep and gentle. "I hear you've been looking for me. I'm James Anderson. How can I help you?" The twins looked at each other, surprise and hope lighting up their tired faces. Emma, gathering all her courage, held out her trembling hand with the crumpled piece of paper. "Please, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need your help. It's very important." James took the paper, a strange foreboding tugging at his chest. When he unfolded it, he saw a hastily written hospital address. "Who's in the hospital?" he asked gently. Emily, tears in her eyes, replied, "Someone very important to us, our mother. She said only you can save her." James felt a wave of compassion for the girls. There was something about them that touched him deeply, though he couldn't say why. "Did you come all the way here by yourselves?" he asked, worried. Emma nodded. "We promised we wouldn't give up until we spoke to you." James stood, his mind racing. He didn't know who was in the hospital or why he was considered the only one who could help, but something told him it was important. "Lisa," he called to his assistant, who was watching the scene with curiosity, "cancel all my appointments for the rest of the day and call my driver immediately." Sensing the urgency in her boss's voice, Lisa nodded quickly and stepped away to make the necessary arrangements. James turned back to the twins, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'll take you to the hospital right now. You were very brave to come here." The girls nodded, relief evident on their weary faces. Minutes later, they were riding in James's luxurious car, speeding through the city streets toward the hospital. The twins, seated in the back, looked small and vulnerable against the black leather seats. James tried to organize his thoughts. Who could be in the hospital? Why was he considered the only one who could help? And why did these girls look so familiar, even though he was sure he'd never seen them before? "Can you tell me who's in the hospital?" James asked gently. Emma and Emily exchanged glances. "She told us not to say," Emma answered, "just to bring you there." James nodded, respecting the mysterious request. "All right, we'll find out together when we get there." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional directions from the twins about the way to the hospital. James used the time to mentally prepare for whatever awaited him, though he had no idea what to expect. When they finally arrived at the hospital, James felt a strange anxiety. He followed the twins through the sterile white corridors, each step bringing him closer to something important, something life-changing. At last they stopped in front of a closed door. Emma and Emily looked at James, waiting for him to take the lead. With a deep breath, he placed his hand on the doorknob, bracing himself for the unknown. As he opened the door, the first thing James saw was the frail figure of a woman in the hospital bed, hooked up to several machines. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, a constant reminder of how fragile life can be. For a moment, James froze in the doorway, unable to believe what he was seeing. The woman opened her eyes slowly, blinking a few times before focusing on James. Her eyes widened in recognition and shock. "James," she whispered, her voice raspy and weak. You actually came." The impact hit him like a wave, leaving him momentarily speechless. It was Sarah, his younger sister, whom he hadn't seen in 6 long years. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here now." The twins ran to their mother's bedside, eager to share their adventure. But for James, time seemed to stand still. He looked at the girls again, truly seeing them for the first time. The blonde hair, the blue eyes, the tiny freckles on their noses. They were the mirror image of Sarah as a child. In that moment, James realized he wasn't just reuniting with his long-lost sister. He was discovering a family he never knew he had. Heart pounding, mind spinning, he stepped toward the bed, ready to face the past and perhaps build a new future. The hospital room was steeped in tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitors and the soft hiss of the oxygen tank. The cold, impersonal fluorescent lights contrasted with the gravity of the moment unfolding. Emma and Emily rushed to Sarah's bedside, their small hands clutching the metal rails as their faces lit with a blend of relief and pride. Their eyes sparkled with the excitement of a mission accomplished, barely containing the thrill of their adventure. "Mummy, we did it," Emily exclaimed, her voice shaking with emotion. "We brought Mr. Anderson just like you asked." "Yes, Mommy," Emma added, her usually serious tone now brimming with enthusiasm. "We waited all day, but we didn't give up." Sarah, pale and visibly weak, managed a weary smile for her daughters. Her eyes, though shadowed by deep circles, gleamed with love and pride. "My brave girls," she whispered, her voice raspy. "You were so courageous. I'm so proud of you." While the twins shared every detail of their journey, James remained frozen in the doorway, his body stiff with the shock of the revelation. Sarah, his baby sister, whom he hadn't seen in 6 long years, lay there as a ghost of the bright teenager he remembered. And the twins, his nieces, whose existence he had known nothing about, were living proof of lost time and wasted opportunities. Slowly, as if moved by an unseen force, James walked over to the bed. Each step felt heavy, burdened by years of silence, regret, and unanswered questions. The sound of his shoes on the linoleum echoed in the room, marking the physical and emotional distance he needed to cross. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I had no idea." Sarah turned her gaze to her brother, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief, hurt, hope, and fear. For a moment, time seemed to roll back, and James saw the little girl who used to follow him everywhere, begging to be included in his adventures. "James," she replied, her voice weak but steady, "thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." The silence that followed was thick, loaded with words left unsaid and feelings long suppressed. The twins glanced from their mother to the tall man, sensing the tension in the air, but not fully understanding its origin. They shifted restlessly, their small faces scrunched in confusion. Finally, James broke the silence, his voice strained with emotion. "What happened, Sarah? Why didn't you reach out to me before, all these years?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering strength. When she opened them again, there was a determined look he recognized, one she used to have as a child, facing a particularly tough challenge. "It's a long story, James," she began, "one that involves pride, fear, and a lot of mistakes on both sides." James pulled up a chair next to the bed, sitting down heavily. The leather squeaked under his weight, an oddly loud sound in the quiet room. "Tell me," he asked gently. "Please, I need to know." Sarah glanced fondly at her daughters, who were still clinging to the rails of the bed, their large, curious eyes darting between their mother and the newly discovered uncle. Emily, sweethearts," Sarah said softly, "why don't you go to the cafeteria and get a snack? I'm sure you're hungry after your big adventure." The girls hesitated, reluctant to leave their mother's side. Emily bit her lip, a question clearly forming in her mind. "But Mommy," she began, "who is this man? Why is he so important?" Sarah smiled sadly. "That's a story for another time, sweetheart. Right now, please go get something to eat. I promise I'll explain everything later." With one last curious look at James and a tight hug for Sarah, the twins finally left the room, leaving the siblings alone with years of silence and secrets between them. Sarah waited until the sound of her daughter's footsteps faded down the corridor before turning her attention back to James. She took a deep breath, the effort making her cough lightly. "Idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis," she began, her voice low and weary. "It's a rare, progressive disease. My lungs are scarring, making it harder and harder to breathe. The doctors, they're not very optimistic." James felt his heart constrict, the reality of the situation hitting him full force. "How long?" He couldn't finish the question, the words catching in his throat. "Without a transplant? Months, maybe weeks," Sarah replied, the bluntness of her words clashing with their gravity. "But finding a compatible donor, well, the odds aren't exactly in my favor." James stood abruptly, unable to stay still. He began pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Why didn't you reach out to me, Sarah? I could have helped. All these years, I could have done something." Sarah let out a bitter laugh that quickly turned into a harsh cough. James rushed to her side, offering her a cup of water. Once she settled, she continued. "I pried, James, the same stubborn pride that tore us apart 6 years ago. I wanted to prove I could manage on my own, that I didn't need your help or our parents. And then, when I found out about the twins, it felt too late to go back." James bowed his head, guilt weighing on him like a lead cloak. "I should have looked for you," he admitted, his voice laden with regret. "After that fight, I thought you'd come back when you were ready. And then, as more time passed..." "The harder it got," Sarah finished. "I know, I felt it too. Each passing day felt like another stone in the wall between us." A silence settled over them, years of unspoken words hanging in the air like restless ghosts. "The girls," James finally spoke, his voice gentle and filled with awe. "They're beautiful, Sarah, so brave and determined. Why didn't you tell me about them?" Sarah smiled faintly, a glimmer of maternal pride in her tired eyes. "They're my light, James, my reason to keep fighting every day. When I found out I was pregnant, it had already been 2 years since we'd last spoken. You were building your empire, appearing on magazine covers. I figured there was no place in your life for a single pregnant sister." James felt tears burn his eyes, the truth of her words hitting him like a punch in the gut. "There always would have been room for you, Sarah, always. I'm sorry I made you feel you couldn't come to me." At that moment, the door opened and the twins came in, carrying snack bags and juice boxes. They paused, sensing the emotional atmosphere in the room. "It's all right, sweethearts," Sarah reassured them, opening her arms to her daughters. "Come here, I want to introduce you properly. This is James, my brother, your uncle." The girls' eyes widened in surprise and curiosity. James knelt down to their level, his heart pounding at the prospect of meeting his nieces. "Hello, Emma and Emily," he said softly. "I'm so happy to meet you, truly." The twins glanced at their mother, who nodded encouragingly before timidly moving closer to James. "Are you really our uncle?" Emma asked, her voice serious and analytical. "Yes, I am," James replied, a genuine smile lighting up his face for the first time since entering the room. "Is Mommy going to get better now?" Emily asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Is that why we had to find you?" James felt his heart clench at his niece's innocent and hopeful question. He looked at Sarah, seeing the fear and hope in her eyes. In that moment, he made a decision that would change all their lives. "I will do everything in my power to help your mom," he promised, his voice firm. "Absolutely everything. I won't give up no matter how hard it gets. We're in this together now." Sarah reached out her hand and James took it, feeling the weak pressure of her fingers. In that touch, years of hurt and resentment began to melt away, replaced by a shared determination to fight, not just for Sarah's health, but to mend the family bond that had been neglected for so long. While the twins settled beside their mother, sharing snacks and excitedly recounting their day, James watched the scene with a mixture of newfound love and a profound sense of responsibility. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with medical and emotional challenges, but he was determined not to fail his family again. The future was uncertain, overshadowed by Sarah's illness and years of separation. But in that hospital room, at that very moment, a spark of hope was ignited. A broken family had taken its first steps toward healing, not just the body, but the heart, and James silently vowed to do everything in his power to keep that spark alive, no matter what the future held for them. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hospital corridors as James Anderson walked with purpose, his cell phone pressed to his ear. His normally calm and controlled voice now carried palpable urgency. "I don't care how much it costs," he said, frustration clear. "I want Dr. Hines here as soon as possible. Use the company jet if necessary." Hanging up, James paused for a moment, leaning against the cold hallway wall. He closed his eyes, allowing himself a brief moment of vulnerability away from his sister's and niece's eyes. The weight of it all hit him hard. His sister fighting for her life, 2 nieces he barely knew, and years of distance that now seemed like an insurmountable chasm. Inside Sarah's room, Emma and Emily sat on a small couch, their big, curious eyes following every move of their newly discovered uncle. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand the sudden change in their lives. "Si, why does Uncle James look so worried?" Emma asked in a hushed tone, her observant nature picking up on the tension in the air. Emily shrugged, her golden curls bouncing. "Maybe he can help Mommy get better with all his money." Sarah, lying in the hospital bed, listened to her daughter's conversation with a mix of love and concern. Her feelings toward James were a storm of gratitude for his immediate help, lingering resentment for the years of silence, and a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to rebuild their family bonds. James re-entered the room, his expression a mask of determination. "Sarah," he began, his voice gentler than usual, "I'm bringing in the top pulmonary specialists in the country. Dr. Hines will be here tomorrow for a consultation." Sarah nodded faintly, offering a tired smile. "Thank you, James, but you don't have to do all this. I know how expensive it must be, and—" "Don't even think that," James interrupted, his tone firm. "Money is not an issue. Your health is all that matters right now." His words lingered in the air, loaded with meaning. For James, it was a shot at redemption, a chance to make up for the lost years. For Sarah, it was a painful reminder of everything that could have been different if they had stayed in contact. The twins watched the exchange curiously. Emma, always the keen observer, noticed the tension beneath the surface. "Mommy," she asked, "why didn't you ever tell us about Uncle James before?" The room fell silent, the innocent question exposing old wounds not yet healed. Sarah and James shared a look, years of unsaid words passing between them. "It's complicated, sweetheart," Sarah finally answered, her voice trembling. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and drift apart, but what matters is that we're together now." James felt the weight of guilt pressing down on him again. He moved closer to the bed, taking Sarah's frail hand in his. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For the lost years. For not being there when you needed me." Sarah returned the pressure in his hand gently, tears bright in her eyes. "I'm sorry too, James. Pride and fear kept us apart for far too long." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the medical team. Dr. Carter, the pulmonologist overseeing Sarah's case, entered, followed by 2 residents. His serious expression did not bode well. "Ms. Anderson, Mr. Anderson," he greeted them, his tone professional. "We have the results of the latest tests and, well, the news is not good." James straightened, his posture radiating authority. "What are our options, Doctor?" Dr. Carter hesitated, glancing at the twins. Sensing his cue, James turned to his nieces. "Emma, Emily, why don't you go to the cafeteria and get something for your mom?" The girls protested at first, but after a reassuring look from Sarah, they left the room reluctantly. With the children out of earshot, Dr. Carter continued. "The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated. Without a transplant, we're talking about weeks, perhaps a couple of months at most." The shock of this news hit James and Sarah like a punch to the gut. Sarah closed her eyes, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. James, for his part, went into action mode. "What are our options?" he demanded. "There must be something we can do." Dr. Carter sighed. "There are some experimental treatments that can slow the disease's progression, but they're expensive and not guaranteed. The only real cure would be a lung transplant." "Then let's do it," James said without hesitation. "Put Sarah at the top of the transplant list. I'll make any donations needed to the hospital. Just make it happen." The doctor shook his head sadly. "It's not that simple, Mr. Anderson. Even with your influence, finding a compatible donor in time will be a huge challenge. and the procedure itself is extremely risky in Sarah's current state. James felt frustration build inside him. All his wealth and power seemed useless in the face of his sister's fragile life. "There has to be something we can do," he insisted, his voice betraying his desperation. Sarah, who had remained silent, spoke softly. "James, please, I don't want my last days to be a fight against the inevitable. I want to spend whatever time I have left with my daughters, with you." Her words tore at James's heart. He found himself torn between the desperate desire to save his sister and respecting her wishes. Guilt for the lost time gnawed at him, fueling his determination to do something, anything, to fix this. "I'm not giving up on you, Sarah," he said firmly. "Not now that we've finally found each other again." Dr. Carter, sensing the tension, stepped in. "Perhaps we can reach a middle ground. We can start some less invasive treatments to buy more time while we continue to search for a suitable donor." James and Sarah exchanged looks, years of unspoken communication resurfacing. Finally, Sarah nodded slightly. "All right," she agreed. "But promise me, James, that you won't lose yourself in this fight. My daughters will need you no matter what happens." James swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation hitting him with full force. He nodded, determination gleaming in his eyes. "I promise, Sarah. I'll be here for all of you, no matter what happens." As Dr. Carter began explaining the next steps, James found himself facing decisions that would shape not only Sarah's future, but the future of their entire family. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but he was resolved not to fail his sister again. Outside the room, Emma and Emily returned with snacks, unaware of the life and death decisions being made behind that door. Their world, already turned upside down, was about to change even more as their mother's fight for life intensified. The hospital corridor was quiet, except for the occasional beep of machines and the distant murmur of conversations. James Anderson sat in an uncomfortable chair, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the sterile surroundings. His eyes were fixed on the closed door of Sarah's room, where she was undergoing yet another round of tests. The last 48 hours had been a roller coaster of emotions, with doctors coming and going, explaining procedures and discussing treatment options. James had agreed to everything, signed every form, determined to give Sarah every possible chance. Now, in this rare moment of tense quiet, the memories he had kept carefully locked away began to resurface. 6 years ago, the night everything changed. James closed his eyes, the scene playing vividly in his mind. Sarah, then 17, her eyes blazing with anger and hurt. He, at 23, freshly graduated and already obsessed with his rising career. "You don't understand, James," Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "It's not just a phase. I love Jack, and we're going to be together whether you and our parents like it or not." He remembered scoffing, dismissing his sister's feelings as teenage infatuation. "Be realistic, Sarah. He's a washed-up musician who'll probably be begging on the streets in a year. You have a bright future ahead of you. Don't throw it all away over a summer fling." The argument had escalated quickly. Hurtful words were exchanged. Years of unresolved resentments burst into the open. And then, "I'm fine," Sarah had shouted, tears streaming down her face. "If that's how you feel, maybe it's better if I leave. Clearly, you don't need me around." James remembered standing there, shocked as Sarah ran upstairs. Minutes later, she came down with a backpack. "Sarah, don't be ridiculous," he had said, his voice calmer but still condescending. "Where are you going?" "Away from here," she replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "Don't worry, I won't tarnish your precious career or embarrass the family." And with that, she walked out the door, leaving James stunned in her wake. Back in the present, James opened his eyes, the guilt nearly crushing. Why hadn't he gone after her? Why had he let pride and arrogance keep him from reaching out in the days, weeks, and months that followed? "Uncle James!" Emily's small voice drew him back to the present. He looked down to see the twins standing beside him, their faces a mix of curiosity and worry. "Hello, girls," he said, forcing a smile. "Where have you been?" "In the playroom," answered Emma. "Nurse Claire took us there while Mommy did her tests." James nodded, grateful for the hospital staff's kindness. "That's good. Did you have fun?" Emily shrugged. "Sort of. We miss Mommy." She hesitated a moment before continuing. "Uncle James, why did you never come visit us before?" The innocent question hit James like a punch in the gut. How could he explain 6 years of absence to a 4-year-old? "It's complicated, Emily," he began carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. I made a very big mistake by not looking for your mom for so long." Emma, ever observant, frowned. "Mommy used to get sad sometimes when she thought we weren't looking. Was it because of you?" James felt his heart clench. "Probably, in part," he admitted. "Your mom and I, we drifted apart, and I regret that so much." The girls exchanged looks, processing his words. Just then the door to the room opened and Sarah was wheeled back in, looking exhausted, but managing a small smile at the sight of her daughters. While the twins ran to hug their mother, James stepped forward slowly. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. Sarah sighed. "Tired. But the doctors say the initial results are promising. The new treatment might buy us some time." James nodded, grateful for any positive news. As the girls enthusiastically described their playroom adventures to Sarah, he watched his sister, noticing the love and strength she radiated, despite her frail condition. "Sarah," he said once the girls paused for breath, "and I'd like to know more about the last 6 years if you feel up to talking about it." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, as if gauging his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. Girls, why don't you go with Nurse Claire to get a snack? Mommy needs to talk with Uncle James for a bit." After the twins left, Sarah began to speak. She described the difficult early months after leaving home, discovering her pregnancy, and the fear she felt. She explained how Jack had abandoned her upon learning she was pregnant, and how she'd struggled to survive working low-paying jobs while taking night classes. With each word, James felt like another piece of his heart was being ripped out. The image of Sarah, young and scared, facing pregnancy and motherhood alone, haunted him. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked, his voice strangled by emotion. "I would have helped Sarah, no matter what happened between us." Sarah gave a sad smile. "Pride, James. The same pride that tore us apart in the first place. Then, the longer I waited, the harder it got. I saw you in the news, building your empire. It felt like our worlds were too far apart." James closed his eyes, realizing how much he had truly lost. Not only the years with his sister, but also the first precious years of his nieces' lives. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "Sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I let my ambition blind me to what really mattered." Sarah reached out, taking his hand. "We're here now, James. That's what matters." In that moment, looking at his sister, frail yet determined, James made a silent promise. He would not repeat the mistakes of the past. No matter what happened next, he would be there for Sarah and the girls. The empire he built, the success he had chased for so long, all felt empty compared to what truly mattered: family. With a heavy heart filled with regret and a renewed sense of determination, James prepared himself for whatever the future held, vowing not to waste another precious moment with the family he had nearly lost. The steady beeps of the heart monitors filled Sarah's hospital room, a constant reminder of how fragile her life was. James sat beside his sister's bed, watching her pale face and the tubes that had become part of her daily reality. The last 24 hours had brought a whirlwind of emotions and bad news. Dr. Carter entered the room, his grave expression revealing the seriousness of the situation even before he spoke. "Mr. Anderson, may I speak with you for a moment?" James nodded, casting one last worried glance at Sarah before following the doctor into the hallway. Emma and Emily, who had dozed off on a nearby sofa, were gently awakened by a nurse to make space for the conversation. "What's going on, Doctor?" James asked, tension evident in his voice. Dr. Carter sighed deeply. "Sarah's condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. The conventional treatments aren't achieving the desired effect." James felt his heart sink. "What are our options?" "There's an experimental therapy," the doctor explained cautiously. "It's a new cellular treatment that has shown promising results in cases similar to Sarah's. However, James pressed, bracing himself for the caveat. "The risks are considerable," Dr. Carter continued. "We're talking about a procedure that hasn't been fully tested. It could stabilize Sarah's condition, even reverse some of the lung damage, but it could also accelerate her decline." James closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on him. "How long do we have to decide?" "Not long," the doctor admitted sorrowfully. At the rate her condition is worsening, we're looking at days, maybe a week at best." James thanked the doctor and returned to Sarah's room, his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. How could he make a choice that might mean life or death for his sister? And how would he explain it to the twins if she didn't survive? Sitting beside her bed, James gently took her hand. "Oh, Sarah," he whispered, "what should I do?" At that moment, a memory surfaced clear as day. His mother's voice from years ago. "Family is everything, James. No matter what happens, we always have each other." He realized he didn't have to and shouldn't carry this burden alone. With trembling hands, he dialed a phone number he hadn't used in years. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. James was about to hang up when he heard his father's familiar voice. "Hello?" "Dad," James said, his voice breaking. "It's me, James." A stunned silence followed on the other end. "James, son, is that really you?" "Yes, Dad, I need to talk to you and Mom. It's about Sarah." The mention of Sarah's name seemed to burst the dam of emotions. "Sarah? What happened? Is she okay? We haven't seen her in so long." James took a deep breath, preparing for the difficult words that were about to come. "No, Dad, she's not okay. She's in the hospital. It's serious." What followed was a tense, emotional conversation. James briefly explained Sarah's condition, the discovery of his nieces, and the terrible decision he now faced. "How could this happen?" His mother's voice came through clearly in tears. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "Mom, James began, but his father cut in. "This is not the time for blame," he said firmly. "What matters now is Sarah and those little girls. We're on our way, James. We'll be there as soon as we can." James felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. I'm sorry for everything." "We all make mistakes, son," his father replied, his voice thick with emotion. "What matters now is that we stand together." After ending the call, James turned his attention back to Sarah. She had woken during the conversation, watching him with tired but alert eyes. "Was that our parents?" she asked, her voice little more than a whisper. James nodded, taking her hand. "Yes, they're coming, Sarah. They'll be here soon." A tear escaped the corner of Sarah's eye. I thought I'd never see them again." "I know," James said softly. "I thought the same, but we're all here now and we're going to face this together." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, there was a look of determination. "The experimental treatment," she said. "Let's do it." James looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure? The risks?" "I know the risks," Sarah interrupted gently. "But I have 2 little girls I need to fight for, and now I have my family back. It's worth the risk." James felt a lump in his throat at his sister's courage in the face of such terrifying odds. "All right," he agreed. "We'll do it together." Just then, Emma and Emily woke up, rubbing their sleepy eyes. "Mommy?" Emily called, her voice small and worried. Sarah smiled at her daughters, beckoning them closer. As they climbed onto the bed to hug their mother, James watched the scene with renewed love and determination. He knew the days ahead would be grueling. The experimental treatment, their parents' arrival, the explanations they'd have to give the twins, everything weighed on his mind. But for the first time in years, James didn't feel alone. They were a family once again, imperfect and bruised, but united. And together they would face whatever the future held. The hospital corridor seemed charged with tension as the elevator doors opened. Robert and Elizabeth Anderson stepped out, their faces etched with worry and years of regret. James, who had been pacing anxiously, felt his throat tighten at the sight of his parents for the first time in years. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elizabeth immediately pulled her son into a hug, silent tears trailing down her cheeks. Robert, more reserved, squeezed James's shoulder, his eyes reflecting contained emotions. "How is she?" Elizabeth asked, stepping back from the embrace. James took a deep breath. "I won't lie, it's serious, but Sarah is strong. She's fighting." Robert nodded gravely. "And the girls, our granddaughters?" The word sounded strange, laden with wonder and sadness for the years lost. James led them toward Sarah's room. "Emma and Emily, they're amazing. So brave and smart, you're going to love them." Entering the room felt like stepping into a time warp. Sarah, pale and frail in the hospital bed, turned her head slowly. Her eyes widened as she saw her parents, a mix of shock, relief, and fear passing over her expression. "Mom, Dad." Her voice was just a whisper. Elizabeth rushed to the bedside, taking Sarah's hand. "Oh, my baby," she sobbed, years of longing and regret overflowing in her words. Robert approached more slowly, his expression a mask of contained grief. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we've missed you so much." The twins, sitting quietly in a corner of the room, watched with wide eyes. Emma, ever protective, stepped slightly in front of Emily. James noticed the girls' apprehension and walked over to them. Emily," he called gently, "come meet your grandparents." The girls approached timidly, hand in hand. Elizabeth turned to them, her eyes shining with tears and wonder. "Hello, darlings," she said softly. "I'm your Grandma Elizabeth, and this is your Grandpa Robert." Emily, always the more outgoing, was the first to speak. "Are you Mommy's mom?" Elizabeth nodded, a trembling smile on her lips. "Yes, I am." "Why didn't you ever visit us before?" Emma asked, her tone serious. A heavy silence fell over the room. The adults exchanged looks filled with guilt and regret. It was Sarah who broke the silence. "It's a long story, sweetheart," she said, her voice weak but determined. "But what matters is that we're all together now." Robert knelt to be at eye level with the girls. "Your mom is right, and I promise we'll make up for all the lost time." Gradually, the initial tension began to dissolve. With the resilience typical of children, the twins soon warmed up to their new grandparents. Emily showed Elizabeth her favorite teddy bear, while Emma peppered Robert with questions about his life. James watched the scene with relief and apprehension, barely able to believe his family was together after so long, especially under such circumstances. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation inevitably turned to the past. "Why didn't you ever look for us, Sarah?" Elizabeth asked, her voice shaky. "We would have helped you no matter what." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. At first it was pride, later fear of disappointing you even more. "We're the ones who disappointed you," Robert admitted, his voice laced with regret. "We should have been more understanding, should have looked for you." Sensing the growing tension, James stepped in. "What matters is that we're all here now. We need to focus on the present and the future." As if sensing the need to lighten the mood, the twins began sharing stories about their mother. Emily eagerly recounted how Sarah used funny voices when reading bedtime stories, while Emma proudly described how her mother taught her to tie her shoes. These simple, sweet anecdotes served as a powerful reminder of what truly mattered. Robert and Elizabeth's faces lit up with every tale, glimpsing for the first time the life Sarah had built for herself and her daughters. As evening approached, it became clear that Sarah was getting tired. James noticed the signs and gently suggested that his parents rest at a nearby hotel. Before leaving, Elizabeth hugged Sarah tenderly. "We're here now, dear. We're not going anywhere." Robert, tears in his eyes, kissed Sarah's forehead. "Rest, my girl. We'll be back in the morning." The twins, exhausted by the emotionally charged day, fell asleep on the sofa in Sarah's room. James covered them with a blanket, noting how peaceful their little faces looked. Returning to Sarah's side, he took her hand. "How are you feeling?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Tired, but happy. It's good to have everyone together again." James nodded, feeling a mix of hope and worry. "Rest now. Tomorrow is another day." As Sarah drifted off to sleep, James reflected on the events of the day. The family was reunited, but the future was still uncertain. The experimental treatment lay ahead, and with it, a new wave of challenges. But for the first time in years, James didn't feel alone facing these obstacles. They were a family again, imperfect and wounded, but united, and they would face whatever came next together. The shrill alarm of the medical monitors tore through the air, shattering the fragile peace that had settled over the hospital room. In a matter of seconds, the room was flooded with a medical team, their urgent voices and frantic movements starkly contrasting the silence of moments before. James, who had dozed off in the chair beside Sarah's bed, was jolted awake. His eyes widened in horror at the sight of his sister convulsing, gasping desperately for air. "What's happening?" he shouted, panic evident in his voice. Dr. Carter, who had arrived with the emergency team, didn't look away from Sarah. "Her lungs are collapsing. We need to get her to the ICU immediately." Everything happened in a blur. Sarah was quickly moved onto a gurney and rushed out of the room, leaving James stunned and disoriented. He barely had time to comprehend what was happening before he found himself running down the corridors, following the medical team. Along the way, he encountered his parents, who had just arrived for their morning visit. Elizabeth's face turned pale at the scene, while Robert tried to remain composed, though his trembling hands betrayed him. "What happened?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James, still in shock, shook his head. I don't know. She was okay, and then her lungs..." Words failed him, but none were needed. The fear in everyone's eyes said it all. The next few hours were a nightmare of waiting and uncertainty. The family gathered in the ICU waiting room, each minute feeling like an eternity. James paced back and forth, unable to stand still, while his parents clung to each other for comfort. Just then, Emma and Emily arrived, brought by a nurse who had been looking after them. The girls, sensing the heavy atmosphere, fell silent, their big eyes filled with fear and confusion. "Where's Mommy?" Emily asked, her voice small and trembling. James knelt in front of his nieces, struggling to find the right words. "Your mom is very sick right now, sweeties. The doctors are doing everything they can to help her." Emma, always the more perceptive, looked him in the eye. "Is she going to die?" The question hit them all like a blow. Elizabeth choked back a sob, while Robert turned away, unable to hide the tears welling up in his eyes. James swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I don't know, Emma, but we're all here fighting with her. Your mum is very, very strong." The twins nodded solemnly. Then, to everyone's surprise, they went to their grandparents and gave them silent hugs. It was a moment of pure tenderness amid the chaos, reminding everyone of what truly mattered. Time dragged on. James used every connection and resource at his disposal to ensure Sarah received the best possible care. He made phone calls, sent emails, practically begged renowned specialists to come see his sister. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Robert sought solace in the hospital chapel. They weren't particularly religious, but in that moment, they clung to faith like a lifeline in a storm. The twins, for their part, became the family's unexpected emotional center. Their innocent presence and unwavering love for Sarah served as a constant reminder of what was at stake. They made cards for their mother, told stories of happy moments together, and unknowingly kept hope alive when everything seemed dark. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Carter emerged from the ICU. He looked exhausted, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "We managed to stabilize her," he announced, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "But it's still critical. The next 24 hours are crucial." James stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "What can we do, Doctor? Is there any treatment, anything?" Dr. Carter hesitated for a moment before answering. "There is an experimental procedure we could try. It's risky, but at this point it might be our best chance." "Do it," James said without hesitation. "Do whatever it takes." Elizabeth and Robert exchanged worried glances. "James," his mother began gently, "maybe we should think this through." But James shook his head resolutely. "We don't have time to think, Mom. Sarah is dying. If there's a chance, no matter how small, we have to take it." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with fear and hope in equal measure. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "James is right. Sarah would fight with all her strength. We must do the same." Dr. Carter nodded, understanding the gravity of the choice. "I'll start making the preparations immediately. In the meantime, I suggest you spend time with her. Talking to patients in a coma can help, even if we can't be sure they can hear us." With that, he left, leaving the family to process everything that had happened. James turned to the twins, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation. Emily," he said gently, "do you want to see your mom? She's sleeping now, but I'm sure she'd love to hear your voices." The girls nodded solemnly, their small faces full of determination. Together, the family entered the ICU, united in their love for Sarah and in their desperate hope that, somehow, she would find the strength to fight one more time. Gathering around Sarah's bed, surrounded by machines and tubes, James looked at his family. Despite all the past hurt, unspoken words, and lost years, they stood truly united at this moment. And he knew that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Their love for Sarah was the force that held them together, and it would be that love guiding them through the difficult days ahead. The soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitors filled the ICU, a constant soundtrack that had become familiar to the Anderson family over the past few days. James sat beside Sarah's bed, his hands holding hers gently, his tired eyes fixed on her pale face. Elizabeth and Robert were on the other side of the bed, exhausted but alert. Emma and Emily had finally been convinced to go home with a babysitter to get some proper rest, but not before leaving dozens of colourful drawings all around the room. It was in this tense moment of stillness that Sarah began to stir. At first the movements were subtle, slight furrowing of her brow, a tremor in her fingers. Then, slowly, her eyes began to open. James leapt to his feet, his heart pounding. "Sarah," he called softly, hardly daring to hope. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Elizabeth and Robert leaned forward, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Sarah blinked several times, her unfocused eyes trying to adjust to the light. When she finally managed to focus, she locked onto James. "James?" she croaked, her voice raspy and almost inaudible. But to the family gathered there, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. "I'm here, Sarah," James replied, tears of relief streaming down his face. "We're all here." Sarah turned her head slowly, her eyes widening at the sight of her parents. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, disbelief and emotion evident in her voice. Elizabeth couldn't hold back a sob, taking Sarah's free hand. "Oh, my darling," she cried, "we were so worried." Robert, typically so controlled, had tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Princess," he said, his voice trembling. Sarah glanced around the room as though trying to piece everything together. "The girls?" she asked, a hint of panic in her voice. "They're okay," James quickly assured her. "They're at home resting. They've been coming every day and they left all these drawings for you." Sarah relaxed visibly, a small smile tugging at her lips as she noticed the colourful artwork. Dr. Carter entered, his face lighting up when he saw Sarah awake. After a quick examination, he turned to the family with a relieved smile. "She's doing well. It's nothing short of a miracle, considering how close we came to losing her." His words seemed to break a dam of emotions. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, years of silence and hurt pouring out. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," James began, his voice quivering. "I should have looked for you. I should have been there for you and the girls." "We failed you, dear," Elizabeth sobbed. "We were so stubborn, so blind." Robert, struggling to maintain composure, added, "Can you ever forgive us, Sarah, for all these lost years?" Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she looked at each of them. When she spoke, her voice was weak but charged with emotion. "I made mistakes too," she said. "I was too proud to ask for help, too scared to come back. I think we all have a lot to forgive." A hush fell over the room, heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Sarah broke the silence again, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But we're all here now, aren't we, together? Maybe this is a second chance for all of us." James squeezed Sarah's hand, a shaky smile forming on his lips. "You're right, and we're not going to waste it." In the days that followed, as Sarah regained her strength, the family began the painful but necessary process of healing. Long, emotional conversations took place daily, each family member confronting the ghosts of the past. One afternoon, while Emma and Emily played quietly in the corner of the room, Sarah opened up about her journey as a single mother. "It was terrifying at first," she admitted softly. "Finding out I was pregnant, alone and scared. There were times I almost came home, almost asked for help. But then I thought about all the harsh words we exchanged, and my pride kept me away." Elizabeth sobbed quietly, while Robert squeezed her hand in support. "When the girls were born, suddenly I had two lives depending on me," Sarah continued. "It was the scariest and most wonderful thing I've ever experienced. I worked low-paying jobs, took night classes, did whatever it took to give them a decent life." James shook his head, a mix of admiration and guilt. "You're so strong, Sarah. I was too busy building my empire to see that my own sister was struggling to survive." Sarah reached out, gently touching James's arm. "Don't blame yourself, James. We all made mistakes. What matters is that we're here now, trying to fix things." Emma approached the bed, her big serious eyes scanning the adults. "Mommy," she asked, "were you sad because you didn't talk to Uncle James and Grandma and Grandpa?" Sarah smiled softly at her daughter. "A little, sweetheart. Sometimes adults do foolish things that make them sad for a long time." Emily, joining her sister, added innocently, "But you're not sad now, right? Because we're all together." The simple wisdom in Emily's words struck the adults deeply. Elizabeth was the first to respond, pulling her granddaughters into a tight hug. "You're absolutely right, my love," she whispered. her voice filled with emotion. "We're together now, and that's all that matters." Robert cleared his throat, tears in his eyes. "You know, Sarah," he began hesitantly, "your mother and I, well, we realize how foolish we've been. Too strict, too inflexible. We should have supported you no matter what." Sarah nodded, tears glistening. "I should have trusted you enough to ask for help. I guess we all learned some hard lessons." James, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Sarah, I promise that from now on, I'll be here for you and the girls. Not just as the wealthy brother who can fix everything with money, but as real family, present, supportive, loving." His words touched something deep within Sarah. She opened her arms, pulling her brother into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you can imagine." The twins, sensing the emotional shift, ran to join the hug. Soon Elizabeth and Robert joined in, and the Anderson family found themselves in a collective embrace, tears and laughter blending in a cathartic release. When they finally drew apart, the air felt lighter, as though an invisible burden had been lifted. The wounds of the past, though still present, were beginning to heal. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed filled with possibilities. In the following days, Sarah continued her recovery, not just physically but emotionally. The family spent hours talking, laughing, and sometimes crying together. In many instances, the twins served as bridges between the adults, their simple questions and candid observations often leading to deep, necessary conversations. One afternoon, while Sarah rested, James found himself alone with his parents in the hospital cafeteria. "You know," he began hesitantly, "I think I always blamed you both for what happened with Sarah. I thought that if you had been more understanding, she never would have left." Elizabeth set down her cup of coffee, her eyes sad. "And we blamed ourselves for not being the parents you both deserved. We were too focused on our expectations to really listen to our children." Robert nodded solemnly. "But now we have a chance to make it right, with Sarah, with you, James, and our wonderful granddaughters." James smiled, feeling a surge of affection for his parents that he hadn't felt in years. "I'm looking forward to that," he said honestly, "to really being a family again." Back in Sarah's room, the twins were proudly showing off their latest drawings to their mother. "Look, Mommy," Emily said excitedly. "I drew all of us together. See, there's you, Uncle James, Grandma and Grandpa, and me and Emma." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. We're one big happy family, aren't we?" Emma, always perceptive, asked, "Mommy, now that everyone is together again, will we see Uncle James and Grandma and Grandpa more often?" Sarah paused for a moment, years of pain and distrust battling against the desire for a fresh start. Finally, she answered, "Yes, sweetheart, I think we will. We have a lot of lost time to make up for." Just then, James and his parents returned, bringing with them an air of anticipation and hope. "What are we talking about?" James asked, noticing the smiles on Sarah's and the girls' faces. "About being a family," Sarah answered, her voice filled with emotion. "About new beginnings and second chances." James sat on the edge of the bed, taking Sarah's hand. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I spent so many years constructing my empire, chasing success and wealth. But in the last few days, I've realized that the greatest treasure was here all along. Family, love, connection." Elizabeth and Robert drew closer, forming a small circle around Sarah's bed. "We've all learned valuable lessons," Elizabeth said softly, "and while we can't change the past, we can certainly shape our future." Robert, usually so reserved, surprised them by suggesting, "How about we start right now? When Sarah is discharged, we could all go to a lakeside cabin for a while, spend time together, really reconnect." The twins squealed in delight at the idea, while the adults exchanged looks of surprise and then agreement. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Dad," Sarah said, her voice catching with emotion. "A new beginning by the water." James nodded, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "I agree, it's time we created some happy new memories." As the family began making animated plans for cabin activities and game nights, Sarah leaned back against her pillows, watching them with a full heart. Just a few weeks ago, she had been fighting alone, carrying the world's weight on her shoulders. Now, though still recovering physically, she felt stronger than ever. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still difficult conversations to be had, and old wounds to be fully healed. But as she looked at her daughter's radiant faces, her brother finally by her side, and her parents back in her life, Sarah knew they would face it all together. The Anderson family had been given a second chance, an opportunity to correct past mistakes and build a future filled with love, understanding, and unity. And they were determined not to waste. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Sarah's hospital room, casting a golden glow over her as she sat on the bed, flipping through a photo album with her daughters. James stood by the door, his heart brimming with a mixture of love and determination. Over the past few days, as Sarah's discharge approached, James had spent countless hours thinking about the future. The idea of his sister and nieces returning to the cramped apartment they'd lived in before her hospitalization weighed on him. He wanted to offer more safety and comfort they deserved. With a sigh, James stepped into the room, his expression serious yet gentle. "Sarah, can we talk for a moment, in private?" Sarah looked up, curiosity clear in her eyes. "Sure, James. Girls, why don't you go see if Grandma and Grandpa have arrived yet?" Emma and Emily, always eager for a mission, jumped off the bed and left the room, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. James took a seat in the chair beside the bed, his hands restless. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about what happens when you leave the hospital." Sarah frowned slightly, a note of concern in her voice. "What do you mean?" "Well," James began, carefully choosing his words, "I'm not comfortable with you and the girls going back to that tiny apartment, especially considering your ongoing recovery." Sarah sat up straighter, a defensive spark in her eyes. "James, I appreciate your concern, but that apartment is our home. We're fine there." James drew a deep breath, sensing how delicate the topic was. "I know, Sarah, and I'm not suggesting you give up your independence. But what if we found a compromise? A bigger house, closer to me and Mom and Dad, where you could have more space and support?" Sarah was silent for a moment, clearly torn by conflicting emotions. "James, I can't accept a house from you. It's too much." "It's not a gift, Sarah," James said gently. "Think of it as an investment in our family. You can pay a fair rent if it makes you feel better. What matters is that you and the girls are safe and comfortable." Sarah bit her lip, years of pride and self-reliance battling the idea of a better life for her daughters. "I don't know, James. What if it creates a strange dynamic between us? What if I feel indebted?" James took her hand, his eyes sincere. "Sarah, you're my sister. The girls are my nieces. There's no debt between family. I just want to help, to be part of your lives in a meaningful way." Sarah sighed, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's just that, for so long it was just me. Fighting, getting by, doing everything alone. It's hard to accept help now." James nodded sympathetically. "I understand and I deeply admire your strength, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. We're all here now, wanting to support you and the girls." A comfortable silence filled the room as Sarah mulled over James's words. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "Okay, let's consider it, but with some conditions." James leaned forward, eager. "Of course, anything you want." "First," Sarah said, "I want a say in choosing the house. It needs to be a place where I feel at home, not just a property you picked." James nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. In fact, I was hoping we could look together." "Second," Sarah continued, "I'm paying rent, a fair market value. I don't want special favors." James hesitated, but, seeing Sarah's determination, agreed. "All right, we can set up a formal lease if that helps you feel better." Sarah relaxed a bit, a small smile forming. "And third, this doesn't mean you can just drop by unannounced whenever you like. We still need our space and routine." James chuckled, relief evident in his voice. "I promise I'll respect your privacy. I'll always call first." With the agreement in place, they spent the next hour discussing potential locations and types of houses. James showed Sarah listings he had saved on his tablet, and soon they were enthusiastically weighing the pros and cons of different neighborhoods and architectural styles. When Emma and Emily returned with their grandparents, they found Sarah and James leaning over the tablet, laughing and pointing at photos. "What are you guys doing?" Emily asked curiously. Sarah and James exchanged smiles before Sarah answered, "Well, girls, we're thinking of moving to a new house when I leave the hospital. What do you think?" The twins reacted immediately and excitedly. Emma began listing all the things she wanted in her new room, while Emily bounced up and down, asking if they could have a garden for flowers. Elizabeth and Robert watched the scene with emotional smiles. Looks like you two have come to an agreement, Robert observed proudly. James nodded, putting an arm around Sarah's shoulders. Yes, we're taking a new step as a family. As the afternoon wore on, the hospital room filled with laughter and shared dreams. Plans were made to visit houses, debates arose over decoration ideas, and lively discussions erupted about the best color for the living room walls. For Sarah, though she still felt a twinge of apprehension at accepting help, there was a growing sense of hope and possibility. She looked around the room at her reunited family, her excited daughters, her caring brother, her loving parents, and for the first time in a long while she truly felt at home. The future, once so uncertain and frightening, now glowed with promise. A new home meant more than just a change of address. It was a symbol of a new beginning for all of them. And Sarah was ready to embrace this new journey with her family by her sea. The sound of laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the living room of the Andersons' new home. Sarah, seated comfortably on the newly purchased sofa, watched with a smile as her daughters, Emma and Emily, darted around, carrying color samples and fabric swatches. "Mommy, look! Wouldn't this blue be lovely in my room?" Emily squealed, holding up a strip of sky blue wallpaper. Sarah nodded, her heart brimming with joy at her daughter's excitement. "It's beautiful, sweetie. It suits you perfectly." James walked into the room carrying a tray of coffees and hot chocolate for the girls. "So how's the decorating going?" he asked, distributing the drinks. "Uncle James," Emma said seriously, "do you think I can have a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf in my room?" James laughed, exchanging a knowing look with Sarah. "Well, we'll have to measure to be sure, but I don't see why not." The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of activity and emotions. Ever since Sarah received word that she could be discharged, the Anderson family had come together with a single goal: to prepare the new house for Sarah and the twins. The home, a charming two-story residence with a small garden, had been carefully chosen by Sarah and James. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood halfway between James's place and their parents', it offered the perfect balance of close family support and independence that Sarah so valued. Elizabeth and Robert walked in, carrying boxes of decorations. "Look what we found in the attic," Elizabeth announced excitedly. "Some items from your childhood, Sarah. We thought you might like a few nostalgic touches in your new place." Sarah carefully took the box, tears filling her eyes at the sight of old toys and family photos. "Oh, Mum, this is wonderful. Thank you." Robert placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We're so glad to be part of this, honey. To be here for you and the girls." Their moment was interrupted by Emily, who picked up an old photo of Sarah and James as children. "Mommy, is this you and Uncle James? You both look so happy." Sarah took the photo, a nostalgic smile on her face. "Yes, that's us. It was during a summer camping trip, remember, James?" James walked over and glanced at the photo over Sarah's shoulder. "How could I forget? That was when you insisted on improving our tent, and we ended up sleeping under the stars because it collapsed." Everyone laughed, and the air was filled with stories. Sarah and James recounted memories of their childhood, while Elizabeth and Robert chimed in with details and their own perspectives. The twins listened, enchanted, discovering a part of their family history they had never known. As the day wore on, the house came to life. In Emma's room, James and Robert worked together to build the coveted bookshelf, their quiet voices discussing lost time and future plans. "You know, Dad," James said, adjusting a shelf, "I'm really grateful we're all together again. I'm sorry for the time we lost." Robert paused, looking at his son. "Me too, James. But the important thing is that we're here now, rebuilding not just this house, but our family." In the next room, Sarah and Elizabeth painted Emily's walls in the chosen shade of blue. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the sound of their laughter. "Mom," Sarah began hesitantly, "I want to thank you for being here, for supporting her, for everything." Elizabeth set the paint roller aside, turning to her daughter with tearful eyes. "Oh, Sarah, we should be thanking you for giving us a second chance, for letting us be part of the girls' lives." They embraced, years of misunderstandings and hurt dissolving in that simple yet profound gesture. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Emma and Emily had taken charge of organizing utensils, turning it into a game of sorting items by size and color. "Emily," Emma said thoughtfully, holding up a wooden spoon, "do you think we'll be happy here?" Emily paused, considering the question with all the seriousness of a 4-year-old. "I think so. Mommy seems happier, right? And we have Uncle James and Grandma and Grandpa close by now. Emma nodded, a grin spreading across her face. That's true, and we have bigger rooms. The girls' giggles echoed through the house, a sound that warmed every adult heart. As evening rolled in, the family gathered in the living room, surrounded by half-opened boxes and furniture, still out of place. Pizza was ordered, and everyone sat on the floor, forming an impromptu circle. So, James said, looking around at his family. What does everyone think so far? I love it, Emily piped up at once. My room is the color of the sky. And I get space for all my books, Emma added with a satisfied smile. Sarah looked at her daughters, then at her brother and parents. It's more than I ever imagined, she said quietly. Not just the house, but this, all of us, together. Elizabeth took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. This is how it always should have been, sweetheart. And it's how it will be from now on. Robert raised his slice of pizza in a makeshift toast. To the Anderson family, to new beginnings and rebuilt bridges. Everyone lifted their slices, laughing and agreeing. The night continued with shared stories, plans for the future, and comfortable silences. Eventually, the twins fell asleep on the rug, surrounded by wallpaper samples and fabric swatches. As Sarah tucked a blanket around her sleeping daughters, she felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. Glancing around at her family, James quietly organizing boxes, her parents tidying up after dinner, she realized this new home was so much more than walls and a roof. It was a symbol of forgiveness, unconditional love, and second chances, a place where old wounds could heal and new memories would be made. In every sense, it was a new start. When everyone finally said goodnight, promising to return early the next morning to continue unpacking, Sarah found herself alone in the living room. She walked slowly through the house, her fingers trailing over the freshly painted walls, her heart brimming with hope for the future. This house, Sarah thought, was not just a place to live. It was a testament to her family's resilience, a monument to the power of forgiveness and love. And as moving day approached, she knew she wasn't just relocating to a new address. She was beginning a whole new chapter of her life with her family by her side, stronger and more united than ever. The morning sun bathed the front of the Andersons' new home in warmth, the windows reflecting the promise of a fresh day. A small group had gathered on the doorstep. James, looking both anxious and determined, Elizabeth and Robert, each carrying boxes and hopeful smiles, and the twins, Emma and Emily, brimming with energy and excitement. The sound of an approaching vehicle made them all turn. It was the hospital transport van bringing Sarah home, bringing her to their new home. James was the first to move, opening the vehicle door and extending a hand to his sister. "Welcome to your new home, Sarah," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Sarah took James's hand, her eyes shining with gratitude and a touch of apprehension. She paused when her feet touched the ground, taking in the view of the house and her gathered family. "Mummy?" The twins' voices broke the silence, and in seconds, Sarah was enveloped in tight hugs from Emma and Emily. "Oh, my little ones," Sarah murmured, kissing the tops of their heads. "We're finally home, aren't we?" Elizabeth stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Come on, dear, let's go inside and get you settled." As the family entered the house, the air was charged with emotion and anticipation. Sarah looked around, amazed at the transformation that had taken place in recent weeks. Once empty walls were now adorned with family photos and colorful artwork chosen by the twins. Carefully selected furniture filled the rooms, creating a cozy, welcoming environment. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't even know how to thank all of you." James placed an arm around his sister. "You don't have to thank us, Sarah. This is what family does." Robert, carrying the last of Sarah's bags, smiled at his daughter. "We're so happy you're here, Princess. This house was waiting for you." The twins, unable to contain their excitement, grabbed Sarah's hands. "Come on, Mommy, we want to show you our rooms." Sarah laughed, letting herself be guided by her daughters. The rest of the family followed close behind, eager to witness her reaction. First stop was Emma's room. The walls were painted a soft green, and the promised floor-to-ceiling bookshelf dominated one wall. Emma ran over to her new desk, grabbing a drawing. "Look, Mommy, I drew our entire family in our new house." Sarah took the drawing, tears in her eyes as she saw the stick figures representing all of them. James, Elizabeth, Robert, Emma, Emily, and herself. "It's beautiful, Emma. We'll frame it and hang it in the living room, okay?" Next was Emily's sky room. The soft blue walls created a serene atmosphere, and little white clouds were painted near the ceiling. "Look, Mommy, Grandpa helped me put up glow-in-the-dark stars." Emily pointed to the ceiling where dozens of tiny star stickers formed constellations. Sarah hugged her daughters, a wave of love and gratitude washing over her. "Your rooms are wonderful, my dears. You must have worked so hard." "So we all did," James said with a smile. It was a family effort. Heading back downstairs, they all gathered in the living room. Elizabeth had prepared tea and cookies, and everyone settled onto the sofas and chairs. "You know," Robert began, looking around at his reunited family, "just a few months ago I never could have imagined us all here like this." Elizabeth nodded, taking her husband's hand. "So much time lost, so much pain." "But look at us now," James interjected, his gaze drifting from Sarah to the twins and then to his parents. "We're here together, a family again." Sarah, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. I want to thank all of you, not just for the house, but for not giving up on me, on us." She looked at her daughters, who were playing happily on the rug. "For so long, I thought I had to do everything alone, that asking for help was weakness." James leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sarah, you're the strongest person I know. Raising these wonderful girls on your own, fighting such a serious illness. You're incredible. And now," Elizabeth added softly, "you're not alone anymore. We're all here, ready to support you and the girls in whatever you need." Robert cleared his throat, visibly moved. "You know, Sarah, your mother and I made a lot of mistakes. We were too hard, too inflexible. But if you'll give us the chance, we'd like to make up for all that lost time." Sarah looked at her parents, years of hurt and resentment melting away in the face of their obvious love. "I'd love that," she said softly. The twins, sensing the importance of the moment, approached Sarah. Emma, the ever-observant one, asked, "Mommy, does that mean we'll see Uncle James and Grandma and Grandpa more often now?" Sarah smiled, pulling her daughters into a hug. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll see a lot more of them from now on." Watching the scene, James felt a surge of emotion. For years he had focused on constructing skyscrapers, expanding his corporate empire. But in that moment, as he looked at his reunited family, Sarah smiling genuinely for the first time in years, his parents doting on their granddaughters, and the twins filling the house with laughter, he realized that his greatest project and achievement wasn't a building, but the rebuilding of these nearly lost family bonds. "You know," he said, drawing everyone's attention, "I spent years building things, towers, companies, fortunes, but nothing compares to this. To us, here together." Elizabeth smiled at her son. "You're right, James. This, our family, is the real treasure." As the afternoon wore on, the house filled with the twins' giggles, the aroma of dinner being prepared and the sound of lively conversation. Sarah, reclining on the sofa and watching it all, felt a peace she hadn't known in years. This was more than just a new home. It was a new beginning for all of them, a chance to heal old wounds, create new memories, and strengthen the bonds that held them together. When evening came and the twins were tucked into bed, Sarah found herself alone on the porch, gazing at the stars. James joined her, offering a mug of tea. "So," he asked softly, "how are you feeling?" Sarah smiled, a genuine smile that lit her face. "At home," she replied simply, "truly at home." And as the siblings stood side by side under the night sky, they both knew this new chapter of their lives would be filled with love, forgiveness, and most of all, family. The future, once so uncertain, now shone with promise and infinite possibilities.